Hi, I'm Mary Sebecki with the Need More Fund in Toledo, Ohio, and also the board of the Ohio Grantmakers Forum. And today I'm here with H.A. Musser Jr., who is the president and CEO of the Santa Maria Community Services in Cincinnati, Ohio. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here
Good
today.
to be here.
So tell me something about your organization, going back even a little bit, let's say prior to 2008. Tell me about your operations, how the organization was proceeding along in its business and affairs.
Well, Santa Maria Community Services is a 113-year-old agency. We are in the settlement house tradition and a neighborhood-based organization working with families and children in the west side of Cincinnati in the Price Hill area. And we've always done well. Seems like through good times and bad, including the Great Depression, we've been able to continue on. And as we've gone through the recent economic downturn, that's been something I've thought about periodically, is how we must have weathered many storms worse than this in decades past. We are, prior to 2008, just prior, we were doing just fine financially. We had some cash reserves, unrestricted cash reserves, and our contributions were on the uptick, and things were going well.
So tell me, after the end of 2008, when we hit the economic downturn, how did it affect your organization in a lot of different areas, ranging from your funding sources to the services, the demand for services, because obviously on the income side there were issues, but obviously people in the community were experiencing greater needs and were also experiencing the economic hardship. So was there an increased demand for service? What did it look like for you after 2008?
Yes, we are being neighborhood-based. We provide a wide range of services. We're helping parents get their kids ready for kindergarten. We're promoting school success for older children. We're preventing homelessness with families. We're connecting uninsured adults to health care access. And we even deliver Meals on Wheels. So a wide age span of services. All of those have seen an increase in demand, but in particular, the ones we've observed that have increased demand are those related to the economy and jobs. So when people have lost their jobs, we have more uninsured people looking for health care access, and we have more people who've had challenges with their housing. They can no longer afford to live where they have always lived because of loss of a job. So those two programs in particular have seen increases. I think in terms of the funding side, our United Way locally is one of the best in the country, top per capita giving, top 5 in the country, and they've even had a tough time meeting their goals. We're about 1/3 funded by the United Way locally, and historically have been receiving money through the United Way since 1917. So that's a tough period of time for them. We didn't have direct impact because we don't have a significant endowment. We didn't really lose direct service programming from our endowment, but we saw the effects of that in some major donors who were giving off of their assets and could no longer do that. And then, of course, foundations have had more limited funds available as a result of the downturn.
Okay. So as you look back on that period and since that time, what are some of the lessons that you learned? And who or what organizations or individuals were you able to turn to during that time to help guide you through this storm?
Yeah, we have a great board, engaged board of directors. They've become more leaders in the area of fundraising in the last couple of years than they perhaps had been prior. Our staff leadership, we have senior leadership who are very seasoned, long tenure at the organization and in the field. And I also turn to colleagues in the community when I need advice or other peers who've gone through similar kinds of circumstances. It's easy to go to them either in groups or one-on-one and talk about, how are we going to address the areas that are challenging. In terms of our internal adjustments, we've had to make a number of cuts. We're in our 3rd year of not having any raises for our employees. We reduced our pension contribution to the pension fund, 401k. But all of those things were done in conversation with the employees. So we outlined, here are the options that we have to meet our budget next year. We can eliminate a couple of staff positions, or we can absorb the cuts in these other ways, and they've given us feedback regularly that they want to try to keep as many people on the ground delivering services as possible. Let's cut back in these other areas, and so that's how we've been able to manage.
Okay. During this past, few years, have there been things that funders have done that were particularly helpful to your organization, or on the other side, were there things that funders did that were not particularly helpful to your organization?
Yeah, I would say they've been mostly very helpful. One of the things that's been around for several years is a capacity building opportunity through the Health Foundation of Greater Cincinnati and SC Ministry Foundation, where they've collaborated to subsidize very critical training for us, both staff and board, in the areas of board governance, fundraising, marketing and communications, program evaluation, data management, lots of areas that they've allowed us to send people to get training. And so that's been crucial during this time. They've expanded that to include social networking and some of the other more relevant topics now. In addition, I would say the United Way's stuck to their agenda for community impact. I think there was some pressure for them to fill gaps left by cuts in government or other funding, and yet they've been able to stay the course, and I think that's been very positive. And probably the best example is a fund created through the Greater Cincinnati Foundation with 15 funders that pooled dollars after the economic downturn in 2009. They came together and said, we need to focus some of our resources on emergency help, safety net services and housing services. And over the last 2 years, they've distributed more than $4 million in grants to local organizations specifically to address basic needs and housing concerns. And I think that's one of the best responses that I've seen, and the quickest. They pulled together the funds in a very short time. They did a streamlined, very fast process for application by invitation only to a number of organizations. And within a month of our turning in an application, the funds were there ready to help families. So that was a really good response to the situation.
Okay. And at this point in time, as we're looking into the future year, again, we're hearing about state budget cuts, losses perhaps through other sources as well. What are you anticipating over the next year?
I would expect that we're going to have to continue to live within our means and make do with what we have. Clearly, we're going to have to continue to advocate for the most critical services that have the broadest impact, that there be maintenance of funding in those areas. But definitely, we're not going to see a big upturn in our contributions, I believe, from individuals or foundations in the near future. I do think we're going to have to stay the course. Santa Maria is not particularly dependent on state funding, but of course everybody we serve is touched by those resources, and so when cuts happen, they will affect the services that we deliver.
So if there's one thing that you think that the funding community needs to hear from the nonprofit sector right now, what would that be?
Hold us accountable, but give us the flexibility to address emerging needs. It's really important that we have some flexibility to, at the grassroots, at the neighborhood level, to fill gaps as we see them coming. A second might be that funders consider funding infrastructure support for nonprofits that are out there doing the work. So for example, when we are given a grant that's perhaps an 80-20% match, it's very challenging for us to use very limited unrestricted cash that we are able to bring in nowadays to try to match a program and try to pay for a program. So if a program is worth funding, then it ought to be worth funding at 100% of the cost of doing the program rather than at a reduced amount. And then finally, I would say there's an area of need, which is that funds need to be pooled together to help organizations that are looking at strategic alliances or mergers to be able to support the direct costs associated with that. So if there are legal costs, if there are costs associated with public relations and marketing and branding, with setting up new data systems and computer systems, or actual moving costs, all kinds of hard costs that might be able to support the transition of organizations toward merger.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time. Thank you very much. Appreciate your thoughts.